Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, the Rangers lost, I would say, a pretty winnable game against Winnipeg. They bounced back with a better performance against San Jose before going to Seattle and having Jonathan Quick turn into 2012 Jonathan Quick and shut him out. Back-to-back shutouts for 39-year-old Jonathan Quick. Not bad.
It's funky because I was talking about this with my friends on Saturday night, and we were watching the UFC pay-per-view, and my friend Chris, he turns to me and he goes, "Are the Rangers any different than last year? Do I need to start caring yet?" And I was like, you can wait till January, and then you can start watching more than once or twice a week. Because right now, they're still kind of in the feeling out process. I know that's weird to say about a team that had minimal turnover. You know, we're talking about replacing a third-line center, a first-line wing, and a third pair defenseman. And for the most part, this is the same team, same coach, same system, same principles. And it still feels like things are being worked out right now as far as the optimization for certain parts of the lineup. And I think that's the story I'm most intrigued by through the early stages. You know, we did a week of Matt Rempe on the fourth line, and very quickly they realized he needs to play more. So we got Edstrom instead. VZ comes back healthy, and
Edstrom's been good.
Edstrom's been solid. No, the fourth line has been very solid. It's nothing flashy. It's not that high end, but it's reasonably consistent. Putting Lafreniere back with Panarin and Trocheck has worked very well. And then the other two lines, the Kakko Cooley Chytil line was working well, but Chytil's injury puts that into question. Brodzinski's going to slide in there for now. Yeah. We very clearly are going to be in the market for another forward, even though we definitely need another defenseman. We probably need another forward as well now, not knowing what the timeline is on Chytil. But the big story is getting that Zibanejad-Kreider duo going and the team making efforts. You know, they've tried a lot of different things over the years. I mean, at one point during the summer, I went back and looked. They've had like 28 different right wings play with them since 2021. And that includes 2021 where, you know, they had Buchnevich, they've had Gaudreau, they've had VZ, they've had all of the guys they've brought in at the deadline, whether it's Tarasenko, whether it's Roslovic, Patrick Kane, what have you. They have tried everything imaginable to get them close to passable at 5-on-5. And we're still not getting it. And they are good enough most nights. And as was the case last night against Seattle, they're good enough most nights where their talent's going to outlast them. You know, Seattle's not a bad team. They don't got anybody who sniffs the Rangers' best players. You know, Beniers isn't bad, but he's not on the tier of what the Rangers are rocking with. Sure. And same thing with the Sharks game, where they didn't play amazing against the Sharks, but they played more than well enough, and the Sharks have 5 good players on an 18-man roster. So that's more than enough to get them by. You know, Winnipeg was a good measuring stick game, shows the room and the progress that still needs to be made. But they're still figuring things out. There's definitely some roster juggling to go on, whether that's internal, you know, whether we see an Othman or a Berard moonlight, or we see a trade. There's definitely a move to be made. And even if there isn't a trade for until February or March, they're going to keep juggling these lines until they find something that Laviolette likes.
Yeah, and the thing about this too is you take a look at that Winnipeg game, and we can harp on why they lost, right? The 3 giveaways by 93 that led to 3 direct goals. That's you know, it's never it's a tough look. It's, you know, but he had a pretty brutal game, and he was pretty raw about it afterwards. And I think after that he kind of realized how much. I don't want to say pressure, but like how
he's pressing, he's squeezing his stick a little too hard.
He's really forcing the issue, and that Winnipeg game was really the summary of the past. You know, his even strength issues. The last couple of seasons, that was kind of the best example of it, where he's not doing much offensively, and then defensively is giving the puck away, and that leads to direct goals against. So hopefully it's only up from here for him. And the thing about San Jose and Seattle, like you said, I mean, Seattle's not a great team. They're not a bad team, but, you know, I want to see a really good effort against a really good team. You know, like they have Vancouver tomorrow, which, you know, a 10 p.m. start. I know some of us are going to be either fast asleep or, you know, maybe dozing off in the middle of it, but 10 p.m. Vancouver, you got Calgary at 9, you got Edmonton at 10. I mean, you know, they're going on this West Coast swing, and I just want to see them play against Vancouver the way that they would against a team like Florida, for example, in the conference finals. where I want to see them come out and play, because Shesterkin's going to be in it, I would think. I want to see them come out and play in such a way that doesn't rely on Igor to make a million saves to win the game. I want to see a full 60-minute effort from everybody involved that isn't just, hey, the goalie can do it. The goalie can do it all. We're going to hang on and maybe win 2-1, right? Like Schneider and Jones last night were incredible. I mean, the analytics showed it, the eye test showed it, whichever method you want to use to describe how players played. That pairing played really well, and I'm glad to see that Laviolette has stuck to those deep pairings. That so far he hasn't changed anything. Now I understand that after a win, coaches usually don't change anything, and hopefully, let's say they lose one, down the line. Hopefully that doesn't immediately get changed back. That would not be good. Because Jones and Schneider have really been solid together so far, and especially last night. But, we got Vancouver tomorrow, and the biggest thing for me is, okay, well, you beat San Jose, which is a bad team, and even then, you only won 3-2. You beat, you shut out Seattle. Jonathan Quick had a really good game, a better effort team-wise against Seattle. But you got a team like Vancouver that has a lot of speed. Also, JT Miller was benched in the third period. And he's going to be, first of all, he's going to be upset that he got benched, one, and also two, he's playing the Rangers. JT, you know how former players love to play against the Rangers. So I'd be interested to see how the team, knowing all of that, collects themselves and plays tomorrow against Vancouver. I think that's going to be a good litmus test.
If you recall, last year they played Vancouver twice. The time they played them here at MSG, the Canucks stomped them. I was at that game. The final score was 7-2. Maybe the worst game they played all regular season. And then they won the game in Vancouver, and it came down to the last period. It was a very back and forth game, lots of offense, not a lot of defense. And I think for now, as we're in this weird early stage, and I wanted to talk about this big picture wise, because I think this is ultimately the crux of the argument we've had a lot of the last 2 weeks and a lot of the conversation. I understand that Winnipeg had the best 15-game start ever. I'm not particularly concerned about Winnipeg. I'm not right now, these are the teams in the 16 playoff spots: Carolina, the Devils, Washington, Florida, Toronto, Tampa Bay, the Rangers, the Bruins in the East. The only team in that grouping I will say is definitively better than the Rangers right now is Florida. And that's mostly because they won the Stanley Cup last year, not because they are playing that much better than the Rangers right now. I believe they're 2 standings points ahead of the Rangers, even though they're not in the same division. In the West, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Vegas, the Kings, Dallas, Calgary, Edmonton. I am not worried about any of those teams either. And then, I got to throw in, am I really supposed to be worried about a Colorado team that can't get into a playoff spot this early? I know it's early, but I can't see Colorado outlasting. That's the argument here. And I don't know if that's necessarily a ringing endorsement of the Rangers, that the strongest argument for them is that the rest of the league is weak. But that's the strongest argument for them right now, because as you said, they've yet to really string together multiple quality efforts in a row. And part of that is, that's the story of your season, you trying to string those together. Last year, the defining trait of that team was the never say die, that no matter what the deficit was, they always found a way to at least get to overtime, even if they didn't win the game. They showed a resilience that not a lot of Ranger teams have had. They found ways to climb out of 2 and 3 goal deficits against quality opponents in difficult circumstances. And this year, they have yet to get there. I know we've only played 15, 16 games. They've got the fewest games played in the entire NHL so far. But until we get going, I don't want to make any sweeping declarations. I don't want to make any bold proclamations, but they definitely have some work to do. And that's not just in terms of, playing better. That's finding what they're good at. Because right now, it still feels very much so like a lot of individual plays making individual players making individual plays. You think about the Zach Jones goal where he skated around 3 guys, passed it to Cooley, Cooley passed it back to him, he passed it to Kakko, and Kakko passed it right back to him. That's not something you draw. That is not something you're going to do by design. By
the way, Will Cooley tied for 4th in scoring on the Rangers, 12
and
points.
It's all even strength
games.
And he's only getting 13 minutes a game.
Yeah. He's having a season so far.
He's having
it's
really
only been, about a month and a half, but my man's is really leapfrogging what people thought he could be.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that he's shown a little bit more of a propensity for offense than maybe you would have thought. But I think a lot of that stems from the fact that he was playing with a really good dynamic player in Chytil who has the transition. And that's kind of been that issue for that third line when Chytil hasn't been able to play in the last 2 years is you have a significantly lower ceiling. Like, I think Brodzinski is a functional NHL player, but we all understand he has a vastly different skill set and the expectations need to be lower. They have to be. He's, there's a reason he's 26, 27 years old and only really getting a first serious look now. He's a useful NHL player, but my hope is that if this is going to be a long-term injury for Chytil, which I suspect it will be, that we do eventually get a Berard or Othman extended run. I'm not saying the rest of the season. I'm saying 2 weeks. I'm saying 3 weeks. Give me a litmus test of where they are respectively in their development, how NHL ready they are. And let's see, because I don't really want to see 60 games of third line center Jonny Brodzinski. And I know Berard doesn't have a ton.
Lecision, by the way.
Jake Lecision's not playing. Jake Lecision is here as the extra forward, I hope. If Jake Lecision plays, it's got to be because of injuries, not because of coach's choice. But to that effect, I know Berard is not a center by trade. He has minimal experience there. I know Othman has never played center before. But the Rangers need something. They need a little bit of juice right now. That bottom six on paper is pretty bleh. You can get by with low event stuff if your top six carries play. Right now, your best line is great offensively, but also terrible defensively. We're willing to make that concession because they're so good at offense. But when you only have one line that's scoring with any real frequency at 5-on-5, and I'm making that addendum because without Chytil, I assume the numbers are going to cool off as far as 5-on-5 scoring. But when you only have one line that's going to score consistently at 5-on-5, you need to find something to get another part of your lineup going. Because right now it feels like this is kind of the best we're going to do is 2-1, 3-2 a lot of nights. And that's not good enough in today's NHL. You can't get by on 3 goals a night, no matter how good the goaltending is. And it's been great. They got Shesterkin and Quick are both top 5 and goals saved above expected this year. That's great. But 3 goals a game is not going to cut it.
Quick, by the way, just to read it off, he's 4-0. A 970 save percentage, and in 4 games, according to Hockey Reference, a 9.4 goals saved above expected. Now, that's insane. That's absurd. And I think the Rangers have to realize that that is not sustainable. Obviously, like as Quick has been fantastic as backup, and he's been, especially like in that Detroit game where he literally was the only reason Rangers won that game. Like he was incredible. He saved a bunch of goals. That probably should have been goals that, weren't because of him. But the Rangers need to figure out a way to alleviate some of the pressure off of their goaltenders. I know Shesterkin's been doing it for his entire career. They did it with Lundqvist. They're doing it with Shesterkin, where, we can pinch for no reason. Oh, we can make this dangerous pass. Oh, well, if it gets cut off, we have the best goalie on the planet that can stop a breakaway. And that's fine and dandy and all, but eventually you have
it's unnecessary increased volatility.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's adding risk to the situation that you don't need to.
If you want to do it, it's okay in certain situations, but you can't do it 4, 5, 6 times a game and expect long-term success. Even if in these early parts, it's been working for you because Quick and Shesterkin have been so otherworldly good that it masks a lot of these issues. But eventually, these numbers will come back down to earth at least a little bit. Even with Jonathan Quick has been fantastic. 39 years old with these kinds of numbers. Like put 2 and 2 together. These numbers are not going to be this stunning and amazing the entire season. It's not going to happen. So you have to play in such a way that mitigates that. Jonathan Quick is not going to have a 9.5 goals saved above expected the entire way, or it's going to go even higher. Like you have to be reasonable in your assumptions and say, okay, Quick has had 4 fantastic games. Shesterkin has been fantastic for most of the season that he's played so far. You have to mitigate a little bit of that and say, okay, if Quick has a bad week, if Shesterkin has a bad week, we have to play in such a way that lets them do that while not getting completely dumpstered, because that's how a lot of these games have went so far. I mean, the Detroit game, another good, the example that I brought up earlier, where if Quick doesn't play out of his absolute mind, the Rangers lose that game. They have to play in a way that doesn't see that happen, or at least how that happen less frequently. Because again, like, you not only is this not sustainable, you're going to wear your goaltenders out. If they have to make 40 saves a night and 9 of them are high danger, and they're doing all these acrobatic splits and these crazy movements in order to make multiple stops a night, eventually you are going to wear them down. You have to play better team defense in front of your goaltenders.
5, 6, 7. Hang on, I'm counting some. 8, 9, 10 of the games they've played so far this season. They've been out high dangered in 10 of them, and most of those are in the low 40s. There's 2 in the 30s. But the one thing I do want to add on to this, because I do think this is good context and it's important. Hockey is a very score dependent sport, in that the team with the lead is going to concede more scoring chances. And that's why, they win the Detroit game 4-0, but they get outchanced 72-49 because Detroit has the puck the entire third period trying to put the game away. And the Rangers are looking for counterattack opportunities. I do think it's important to note that in addition, because the Rangers by design are okay with conceding a little bit defensively because they want to get to transition game. They want to get the puck to their skilled guys, and they want to try and catch teams, pinching, being too aggressive. And I agree with you in principle that they need to play better team defense and be a little more risk averse. But right now, with the offense, the scoring, the way it's going, they kind of need to take those risks. So it's really a matter of risk tolerance. We talk about it a lot from the perspective of the Lafreniere, Panarin, Trocheck line of, yes, they generate an ungodly amount of offense at 5-on-5, but they also give it back. The thing is, they generate more than they give back, though it's close. The problem is, that's really the only line that's generating a high volume of offense, and they do get the luxury of playing a lot of minutes with Adam Fox, getting slightly easier matchups than what Zibanejad does. So they need to outright dominate in their minutes. And, we talk about it all the time. If they don't dominate in their minutes and you don't score on the power play, where's the offense coming from? That's been the story of this team for 3 years now. As a serious Stanley Cup contender, those have been their 2 avenues: is Panarin does something at 5-on-5 or the power play scores. Occasionally, 2 of the 3 years you've had a decent third line that's been able to contribute meaningfully offensively. But right now, it feels like, as much as we talk about the defense being the issue for this team, it feels like they're not scoring enough. And it feels like the offense kind of is the issue, even though we think the offense is more talented than the defense, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think both of us are right. Like, there's definitely a little bit of both going on, of the, the Porque no los dos commercial of, the defense, it has been a problem, and they should, work on addressing that. But also offensively, they've kind of been in a rut, besides, the aforementioned people that we've talked about, where these problems aren't new. And that's another frustrating aspect of this, is the team defense could be better. Okay, we've been saying that for 20 years. And offensively, they don't do much at 5-on-5, and they score a lot on the power play. We've been saying that for multiple years as well. These are not new issues. And new calendar year, new games, quasi new roster, same problems. And that's kind of been the crux of this team the last few years, is, okay, well, we've identified the problems. You and I, we've hammered it pretty well, I'd say, over the past 3 seasons that we've done the show. We've been talking about their lack of 5-on-5 scoring. We've been talking about how, in the playoffs, when they don't give you a power play, what are you going to do to generate offense? We've been, repeating the same things for over and over, and yet these problems are still here. So at a certain point, yeah, I mean, offensively, I understand the argument of risk and, to create offense. And I'm not saying you shouldn't take risks to try to score. That's not what I'm saying. But the Rangers like to do this thing where sometimes they make that dangerous pass one too many times, a few times a game, or there's a defenseman that pinches in when they maybe shouldn't, and that leads to a 3-on-2 opportunity the other way, and that could lead to a good scoring opportunity for the team. If they do that maybe a couple times too many per game as well, trying to force the offense. And this is what happens when, again, your 5-on-5 scoring isn't there. So you are trying any which way to create it. When you know you're not a good offensive team at 5-on-5, that's what leads to the extra pinch, the extra dangerous pass. It leads to these risky plays that you feel you have to make because your team isn't producing enough 5-on-5 offense. And that leads to a giveaway, a turnover, a 3-on-2, a 2-on-1, a breakaway, what have you. And that leads to either the goaltenders bailing out the team or the Rangers giving up a goal.
It's one of those things where they're fundamentally connected.
Yeah.
You're going to get better. If you get better defense, you're going to play less defense because you're going to stop the other team's offense before they even get there. So you're going to get more offensive opportunities. Right now, it is very individual. It is waiting for a play. There's maybe 7-8 guys in the entire league that can make the pass Panarin makes to Lafreniere to set up the first goal last night. Maybe 7 or 8 guys in the whole league that can do that. And right now, it feels like you're in a waiting game. And, we've talked about this a lot over the years that the regular season is too long. There are too many mediocre teams. Because for a team like the Rangers, we know they're making the playoffs short of disaster. But we still got to play these next 60-something regular season games to see where they get seeded, who has to sell off pieces. And I know people already, I read in The Athletic, who are the Chytil replacement candidates, ranging from like Ryan Donato to Claude Giroux. But I feel like
Claude Giroux, sure.
Claude Giroux already, he didn't want to come here 3 years ago when the Rangers were better and he wanted to go to Florida. I doubt that happens. He's consciously chosen to go to a bad organization because he wanted to be closer to home, and I doubt it. But I'm so bored and so tired of just get to the deadline. The roster's not done until we get to the deadline. The team keeps getting better as we play along the season. And we spent the entire episode, I think it was 2 episodes ago, doing this feels very familiar, because it does. This is the same story. I understand that we got to play these games. We're going to keep looking for reasons to be optimistic. But I still think the biggest reason for optimism is that no one's that good. As good as Winnipeg is, I don't think they're better than the Rangers. The Rangers have more talent.
That was a winnable game last week. It was lost because of sloppy play with the puck, and it led to direct goals against. The Rangers also had a couple of opportunities. Hellebuyck made some really good saves. That was a winnable game. So if you replay that game 100 times, I would have to imagine the Rangers win.
We're doing deserve a win-o-meter discourse in November. We're cooking.
We're in the kitchen right now. But that's what that game actually felt like. Where if those bad turnovers don't happen, that's probably a whole different game. So Winnipeg won a bunch of those games, and now they lost 2 in a row. They got destroyed by Florida. Their rematch, I think, is tomorrow, and all of a sudden, they look like a human team again, right? It's crazy how a team loses a couple of games and all of a sudden everyone's packing up the give Winnipeg the cup now discourse, and now they're human beings again that can actually lose every now and again. Oh no, 82-0 isn't happening. Color me shocked. I for one am thoroughly surprised that nobody in hockey will ever go 82-0. But that was a winnable game, and I mentioned the litmus test against Vancouver tomorrow. It's going to be a late game for us on the East Coast, but it's going to be important from the standpoint of Vancouver's supposed to be one of the top teams in the West. How are the Rangers going to not only start the game like that, but continue to defend against the speed that Vancouver plays with? And on top of that, Rick Tocchet's a good X's and O's coach. He's got some plays under his sleeve. I want to see how the Rangers counter that, and also how they generate offense that isn't just that stretch pass that the Rangers are well known for.
Vancouver's weird because they're kind of in an early season funk as well. I shouldn't say funk, but they haven't played great yet. I would say they're underperforming relative to their talent. Demko is supposed to return any day. I don't think it'll be by tomorrow, but they are a weird team. And I say that because when you look at their roster, especially their defense, they've got 5 guys who are all like 6'4" and taller. None of them are particularly mobile. None of them are particularly good with the puck, but they clog shooting lanes. They clog passing lanes. And Quinn Hughes is really good at hockey. And that's the formula they've chosen. And hockey's hard to look ahead to. It's not like football where you can do tendencies and scheme and try and piece together how you think the game's going to go. Because hockey's so free flowing. You know, you were talking about Winnipeg coming back down to earth. You know, hockey's a season of runs. It's stringing together 4 or 5 wins out of 7 and looking relatively good while doing it. And then that 7th game's a stinker. You know, the Devils lost to the Sharks last week, and then they shut out the Panthers the next game.
Yeah.
Hockey's weird. Hockey is weird like that. And it's really hard to project night to night, especially when the team is still kind of, for lack of a better word, feeling things out. Because it really does feel like it. This isn't nearly as solidified as the lineup was, say, December of last year. I know we got a little bit of time, and I think over the next few weeks, you'll get to see what the lineup's going to look like the bulk of the season. It was about midway through November where they stapled Blake Wheeler onto Kreider and Zibanejad last year, and he stayed there till he got hurt. But that's the thing to keep in mind here. The roster is going to keep evolving, and there are going to be tweaks. You know, I feel pretty strongly that we are going to get an extended look at one of Othman or Perreault at some point in the next month or so, purely out of curiosity and purely because they've never really expressed a ton of confidence in Jonny Brodzinski. Because, like, they were playing Rempe over him last year. Mm-hmm. And, like, I understand what they think Rempe was going to bring them, but, like, we're serious adults here. We can say Jonny Brodzinski's a better hockey player, and you're not playing Rempe because you think he's better at hockey. So with that in mind, I think almost certainly they're going to have to do something sooner rather than later. And I don't necessarily mean a trade. I don't think you're going to see the first trade until like December. That was the Zadorov trade last year, was the first, like, okay, teams are open for business. We're starting to move things. And then Monahan wasn't until January. Lindholm wasn't until January. So I would hold out hope there as far as, you know, Donato, Giroux, maybe Chandler Stevenson, if that, not Chandler Stevenson, excuse me, Yanni Gord, if that's who entices you. But we got a long way to go, man.
I am of the opinion that, like, I'm well aware that a lot of teams don't want to sell yet, right? Everyone thinks they're so competitive. Everyone also wants to keep selling tickets. Like if let's say the Chicago Blackhawks trade all of their, you know, veteran guys now, they still have like 60. Well, let's just say for, you know, 30 home games left that they have to sell tickets to. And if there's no one relevant that's going to play, well, then no one's going to show up. I'm well aware of that. And it's difficult to make a meaningful trade in November. But also at the same time, if I'm somebody like Chris Drury, I'm calling. I'm asking. I'm at least laying the foundation for, okay, this person might be available a couple of weeks. Maybe I can try. Maybe we can finagle a trade. Maybe a 3-team deal for X player and maybe Y guy. You know, because at the end of the day, the more players have time to gel together, the better it is. Not only for, you know, off ice chem, sure, but, you know, on ice chem is important, and also, you know, you just have a better runway to figure out what works with that player and what doesn't. And I forget, someone talked about this, one GM talked about this last season. I can't remember which one it was, but they mentioned how when you bring somebody on board earlier on, you have room for experimentation. You have room to decide, okay, this guy, we've tried him here, gave him like 10 games because we have the runway to do so. Okay, that didn't work. Maybe we could try him here, or maybe this combination works. You have more time to fundamentally understand what works well with new player and what doesn't work well with the new player. It's November 18th. A lot of teams, most teams don't want to trade anybody of relevance or importance. I'm well aware of that. I would like to see Drury, and I would imagine he is working the phones at least.
He's working the pizza oven at Colony Pizza. He'll get to trade soon enough.
I would like to believe at least that he's making some kind of preliminary phone calls, just kind of testing the waters, seeing, who could potentially be available, and trying to make a deal happen before, what is it, March 5th is the deadline, or whatever. Yeah. I would like
4.5 months to go.
Yeah, right. I would like to see some kind of deal done before then, because again, the more time you have with new players, the more time Laviolette has to fundamentally understand, one, where they fit on this roster, and two, what players work well with them, and three, what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are as well in the structure that Laviolette has the team playing in. One player could look really bad on one team in a different environment, a different structure, and then come in Peter Laviolette's environment and look really good, and vice versa. And you don't really understand that until that player has time to figure out and adapt to the new environment. So the more time you can give them, the better it is for everybody involved. But I understand teams don't want to trade anybody that is worth a squeeze with 60 games left to go. I'm aware.
Who do you think ends up trading for Taylor Hall? Because that seems weird.
It might be a team Colorado has no space, and they have to figure out a way to do it. Colorado might, because they're desperate.
I could see that. I mean, we're all, at this point, we're talking about guys like Taylor Hall and Ryan Donato just because they're Flyers. Like, it sounds crazy to say that about Taylor Hall, who's not that old, frankly, but like coming off of a serious injury and very clearly not in favor with the regime there.
He was healthy scratched.
Yeah.
Taylor Hall was healthy scratched.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I mean, hey, the Flyers still healthy scratch Morgan Frost for no real reason, even though he's one of their two best forwards. John Tortorella, I hope he never changes. Magical place that 40 years into professional hockey coaching, we're still doing the angry stepdad taking it out on the kids as opposed to doing a better job. But alas, the one last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of tied into the bigger picture conversation. And I know this is a tall ask. I really hate talking about each hockey game with the outsized importance that it's a football game. Like, every football game is really important because you only play 17, or in college you play 11. We play 82 of these over here in the National. These games, they blur into each other. They blend into each other. When you watch as much hockey as Andrew and I do, when you do as much stuff, reading, you listen to as many podcasts, watch as many shows, everything kind of starts to blur together. I can't be doing referendums about Mika Zibanejad on Tuesdays in November. I understand that everybody's a little antsy and that this team is defined by their playoff expectations. But like, for lack of, we got to have something better to do. Word to Mike Francesa, like there's got to be more interesting things to talk about than the same three things. I feel like I'm losing my mind that we're 3-4 years into this and the team largely hasn't changed. So the storylines haven't changed, but like, aren't we better than this? What's the trolling used to be funny. Now it's just kind of lazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind. The discourse isn't even interesting anymore.
Well, people want their interactions on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Also, if some people are on that, we're both on it. We're exploring the vastness that is Blue Sky. But yeah, I mean, I think a large part of that is we're tired of talking about the same three things. The problem that comes from that stems from that issue is it's because the problems haven't changed.
Yep.
The problems that the Rangers had 3 years ago continue to be here. And I mentioned this a few minutes ago, and we've talked about this multiple times already, but like, I would love to not talk about Mika Zibanejad's poor performance. I would love that. I would love to not talk about Lindgren or Trouba. Like, I tweeted this out, I think it was last week. It's like, I wish all of them would just play well. I wish Zibanejad would just magically figure out how to score. I know he scored finally a 5-on-5 goal. I think it was against San Jose. I mean, the planets aligned for him to finally score one. But like, I really want Mika Zibanejad to be an incredible 5-on-5 player on top of, the power play danger that he is. It would be great. it would be so great. Like, I'm so sick and tired of highlighting the fact that Mika Zibanejad at 5-on-5 is not a good player. Like, I'm sick and tired of it, and I just wish he would shut me up and play better. Like, that's the hope with all. And when we mention Zibanejad or Trouba or Lindgren or or Kreider or whoever, and we say this multiple times, every show as well, but we're not attacking the player like directly. We're talking about specifically their on ice performance.
No,
and like, yeah, and I know that, but it's important that we keep on repeating this because we highlight the issues on this team, and it's important for people to understand that we are not going at anybody personally. This is all 100% about their on ice performance and how well or how not well somebody is playing. So it's been the same storylines for 3 seasons. When we repeat the same things for 3 seasons, because the storylines have been the exact same, it could lead people to believe, oh, you just hate Mika Zibanejad. Oh, you just hate Ryan Lindgren. Oh, you have a vendetta against these players. When that's not the case, we've just had the issues for multiple seasons now, and there's still the problems now, and nothing has changed. So at a certain point, new storylines would be fun. I'm agreeing with you there.
Yeah, because like we got to sit here and be like, damn, is Chytil ever going to play hockey again?
Yeah.
Can the Rangers depend on him to play hockey ever again? Because it sucks. It's another recurring storyline that he can't stay healthy, and there are always going to be people who ruin the conversation, who are just mean-spirited people who want to make fun of other people. But like, any rational person is going to say, we hope he's okay. But
right.
As we said last year, after he tried to come back in January and they sent him home, you can't count on him to come back. As good as he is, I think he's been their best center all year so far. You can't count on him to come back, because that's how you end up what you ended up with last year, where you traded for Weddenberg on the idea that maybe we could get Chytil back. And even if you didn't, you traded for somebody who didn't have a similar skill set. You ended up messing with your lineup a little too much after the turmoil in the Carolina series. You insert Rempe back in. You try Chytil, who didn't look great, but hadn't played hockey in 8 months. You tried Wheeler for 1 game against Florida. I struggle to imagine that I'm going to be banking on Chytil to come back. It's not implausible, but the Rangers need contingencies at this point, and it's unfortunate because he's a good player, man. He's really been their best center this year, and he's been driving what's been their best 5-on-5 line. And without him now, you have real depth issues. There's a reason Jonny Brodzinski has been a fringe NHLer. He's not awful, but he's not going to dynamically change anything. He's a passable NHL player. They very much now, they need another center, and they probably need another left-handed defenseman. And we have to wait 4 months for them to go and get those 2 things.
And like I said, I wish they would not wait 4 months. But I understand that teams don't want to.
You can't sell. You can't buy if no one's selling.
Yeah, that's the crux of it. I do think it's November, and I do think there are at least a couple of teams that maybe they're not outwardly saying this, but the idea that we're not destined to win the Stanley Cup, so let's try to maybe sell high while we can on some guys. I don't, maybe outwardly got teams like Columbus or Chicago or San Jose.
I take Jake Wallman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, listen, I would love Jake Wallman. Like I would assume that all teams at least publicly are like, we still got a chance. All we got to do is win a couple of games, and we're right back in this. But realistically, teams like San Jose and Chicago and Columbus aren't going to win anything anytime soon. So,
and if you're San Jose, it's not like you're selling tickets either. They're playing in front of like 7,000 people a night in San Jose.
That's a whole different conversation, because like San Jose, first of all, I know they're still bad. They're much better than they were last year, which not a very high mark to climb over, because they were one of the biggest atrocities in hockey that we've ever seen. But they're playing relatively okay hockey for the most part, and nobody shows up. Like, nobody's coming. Okay, so if no one's coming anyway, then sell Wallman, sell the Foley's, sell these guys while teams are gonna line up sooner rather than later for him. So start the auction. Get the guy that speaks really quickly. That I don't know the name of the auctioneer. Is it? I don't know. The guy with
auctioneer.
The guy with probably the cowboy hat who speaks really fast to auction off these players to the highest bidder, essentially, and start the bidding process now. It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen in March. It's going to happen in February. Might as well start it now for some of these teams. Even though they want to quote unquote win, even though they don't. Do it now, and maybe there's a player the Rangers like, and maybe you can start that process now as opposed to waiting until March. And kind of like waiting until March is really we're waiting until the final day to start practicing for the test. It's like if you started opening the review sheet now when the test is 24 hours from now, guess what? Not going to do super well on the test.
Especially because the Rangers have the cap space. It's not like 2 years ago where they had to wait till the last possible day to add Patrick Kane because they didn't have the cap space. This year,
I understand that when you wait, you accrue more cap space. I'm well aware of that, but it's a trade-off. If you get the kind of player that you want now, you're going to have a little bit less space in March. No one's arguing that, but you have a much better understanding of how to make that new player work in your system. I'd take that than a little bit less cap space in March.
All right. This is the last thing I want to do on today's show. So I read off all of the teams that are in playoff spots right now. So once again, Florida, Toronto, Tampa Bay, Carolina, the Devils, Washington, the Rangers, the Bruins in the East. In the West, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas, Vegas, LA, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. Who in a playoff spot right now is not going to be in a playoff spot come the end of the regular season?
That's tough. I mean, Boston hasn't played well at all. And I don't know what they do because Swayman hasn't played well at all, which is surprising to me. That might be kind of an iffy team. I mean, Calgary hasn't played well since their early start to the season. So maybe Calgary's out, but okay, well, if Calgary's out, then who would be in? For my agenda, I would say either St. Louis or Nashville because I said Colorado wasn't going to make it. And if Colorado does make it, my mentions are going to be in flames for a long time. So I'd rather for my I have McKinnon on both my fantasy leagues. I am rooting exclusively for McKinnon to score 1,000 points and for Colorado to miss the playoffs only for my personal agenda. But I do think the Calgary Flames ultimately miss, even though they're playing better than people expected them to this point. I think they fall off. I mean, those are kind of my two. Saying that Boston's going to be out is such a, because we said Boston's going to win 50 games somehow anyway because that's what Boston does. But the way they played this season makes me kind of regret saying that because they have been very hit or miss the entire way through 19 games. What do you think?
One thing on the Bruins, they signed Tyler Johnson off the street and he immediately went to their first line. So that goes to show you where the Bruins lineup's at. Logic would tell you it's probably the Bruins and the Flames. In the East, I don't know who gets in that other wild card spot because none of these teams are good. Like the Flyers aren't good. The Islanders aren't good. Ottawa, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Montreal, Columbus. All of those teams are awful.
Yeah.
I think maybe by attrition, the Bruins might end up making the playoffs one more time. In the West, Calgary will cool. Calgary's going to trade people. Calgary's going to trade people too.
Yeah.
Because you've got Rasmus Anderson on an expiring contract. You have some players who are intriguing that you might be able to sell off and make something happen for, like a Blake Coleman or a Michael Backlund, perhaps. I think Calgary probably falls out, and Colorado probably ends up by default because, again, kind of like we just said in the East, no one's that good in the West either. Utah is fine. Seattle's fine. Colorado's getting healthier, which helps. St. Louis has been pretty bland. Nashville's been awful. And then the two Southern California teams, Anaheim, San Jose stink, and Chicago's awful too. I mean, there's not a lot of good teams in the NHL, Andrew.
There's an argument to be made that Ottawa fights it. That Ottawa,
it's not implausible.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're a dangerous team by any stretch, and I'm not suggesting that they're going to go on, a 15-game winning streak and collect all these points and rack up to the top of the Eastern Conference. But they're a team that they've been knocking on the door, and I think it's with actual goaltending this time around with Linus Ullmark in there as opposed to Korpisalo or any of the other 75 goaltenders they've tried over the past 10 years that actually can stop the puck every now and again. I think with Kachuk and Giroux and the core that they have, Stützle has been really playing well. I think they might just be angry enough to collect enough points to make it, and they're a team that I'm interested to see what they do closer to the deadline. Like if they're knocking on the door and they're close, I have to think that they're gonna. I don't want to say swinging for the fences, but I think now is the time for them to start giving up picks. Now, because they have a lot of young talent on that team. They have so many young up and coming guys. It's time to start selling some of these future picks.
I would agree with you. Ottawa's intriguing, but that will just about do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. We will talk to you guys next week.
Later.